Hi, this is Stu Turgel, your host of the Phoenix File, a weekly news magazine and community conversation with the people and programs making a positive impact on the quality of life in our community. The kitchen table has been a place for family gatherings, a place to share emotional and physical sustenance, and the spot where children tell their parents about their day. And it's also a place where love and laughter are exchanged. But after a tragedy, the table also serves as an all too painful reminder of those no longer seated around it. It was at a small, unassuming kitchen table in 1980 where one mom started a national movement. Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or MAD, is devoted to one number, zero. 0 deaths, 0 injuries, 0 families impacted by impaired driving. On tonight's edition of the Phoenix File, you'll learn more about MAD when I welcome Beverly Mason Biggers of the Arizona chapter of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. That's coming up next right here on Radio Phoenix, where the Valley comes to talk, sing, connect. Well, good evening. I'm Stu Turgel, your host of the Phoenix File, a weekly news magazine that features the people and programs making a positive difference on the quality of life in the Valley of the Sun and throughout our state. You know, every 2 minutes in America, someone is injured in a drunk driving crash. And every 51 minutes, someone is killed because of drunk driving. And that makes drunk driving the #1 cause of deaths on our roadways. Beyond the tragic loss of more than 10,000 lives and the injuries to 263,000 Americans each year, the financial cost of drunk driving in this country is estimated to be more than $132 billion annually. Joining me in the studio tonight to talk about the way that drunk driving has ravaged hundreds of thousands of American families is Beverly Mason Biggers. Beverly is the Senior Programs Manager of Mothers Against Drunk Driving's Southern Arizona affiliate office. Beverly's been with MAD since 1996, and she knows all too well the consequences of driving while under the influence, as well as the need for powerful anti-drunk driving advocacy that MAD is so well known for. Beverly found MAD the same way most people find MAD, after her 25-year-old brother Scott was hit by a repeat drunk driver. Scott survived 17 days before passing away and was buried on Valentine's Day, 1992. Bev has worked through the ranks as a volunteer to receptionist, victim advocate, and now she's the Senior Programs Manager for MAD Arizona, working out of the Tucson office. Beverly, thank you for being here tonight, and welcome to the Phoenix File.
Thank you for having us. It's great to be here.
Well, Beverly, MAD has got to be one of the most recognizable charitable organizations in America. And most people know something about MAD's work, which we'll get into during our conversation tonight, but I'm sure that very few people know how MAD got its start. So why don't you take a moment and tell us the story of MAD's founder and the circumstances in her life that gave MAD its start.
A 13-year-old daughter, Carrie, was walking home from a school function and was hit on the side of the road by a repeat drunk driver. With that, we learned about Laura Lamb, who was 6 months old, and her family van was hit by a repeat drunk driver a year earlier. She became the nation's youngest quadriplegic, and the two of them got together and really came up with MAD to just stop the needless tragedy that's out there.
And the founder was Candy Leitner, right?
Candy Leitner, yes.
I read that Candy Leitner often said that she didn't start MAD to deal with alcohol, but instead she started MAD to deal with the issue of drunk driving. I don't know if it's a fair comparison, but I know that other advocacy organizations that got their start from people like Jim and Sarah Brady or Gabby Giffords following a different type of tragedy might say the same thing, particularly when it comes to the epidemic number of lives lost. Now, it's been nearly 40 years since MAD was founded, so can you give us a snapshot of the ways in which MAD has evolved over all that time, from the kitchen table of a grieving family to one of the most important issue-centered organizations in America? How big is MAD today?
Right now, we have a presence in all of the states in the nation. We have about 240 paid employees nationwide and thousands of dedicated volunteers that help us with our mission. In fact, there are at least 2 states that I know of that are totally volunteer run with no
Really?
staff.
No professional staff?
No professional staff, and they do amazing work in their community. So it's really grown. We started out basically just to bring awareness, and then it started to look at the laws or the lack of laws that were out there, and strengthening the consequences. If there's no consequence, there's no reason to change your behavior. If you think about it, this is not a disease. Drinking and driving, impaired driving, we know what causes it. It's the choice to get behind the wheel. So not only are we fighting, we're not a bunch of moms that are trying to, prohibition and all of this, but we're trying to fight the public perception that it's just an accident. It's not. It's a series of conscious choices, and that's what we're trying to bring awareness to.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, when MAD started, the focus was exclusively on alcohol, but over the years, you've broadened that a bit to driving under the influence of substances and drugs also. Is that right?
Yeah, and not only that, but a lot of people think drunk driving. I don't drive drunk. I only drive after I have a couple. I'm just buzzed. Or, it's all the same. Really, if you look at it, impaired is impaired. Whether it's alcohol, whether it's prescription drugs, whether it's over the counter or any combination, if it's enough to make you impaired, you shouldn't be behind the wheel. We get a lot of people that come to our panels, alcohol awareness panels, after they're convicted of a DUI. And they said, I don't know why I'm here. I don't drink and drive. Well, you take prescription, and if you look on that bottle, the label says, do not operate heavy machinery. They're not just talking about bulldozers. They're talking about your vehicle. You can't, you have to understand that impaired is impaired. Doesn't matter what it takes. Just don't get behind the wheel.
Is the day ever going to come when we'll essentially have no one behind the wheel that's impaired, do you think?
I'm really optimistic about it. When we changed our logo or our slogan this last time, we put to end drunk driving. And I thought, I am as big a supporter as MAD as anybody out there, but can we ever really end it? We can. Again, there's no cure. We know what to do. And that's why we really want to push MAD's campaign to eliminate drunk driving. The automated systems that are out there, the alcohol detection systems through touch and breath. If we can't get people to stop making the decision to get behind the wheel, then let's have cars that won't start if they detect alcohol.
And we're going to talk about the interlock systems in a little bit. But it strikes me that if I'm home and I've had too much to drink at home, or if I've gone to a lounge or a bar and have had too much to drink, but I'm not with anyone, then it's a lot harder to deal with somebody like me. I suppose in a bar, the bartender might be someone who could be helpful. But if I'm sitting in my house and I've had way too much to drink and I decide to get in the car to go up to the corner store to get whatever I need, there's nobody to help keep me from getting into the car. It strikes me that a lot of what needs to happen is peer involvement. People who, it wasn't forever that we heard the term designated driver.
Right.
That's I don't know when that term came into vogue, but it hasn't been all that long. That is a very important concept, the notion of a designated driver.
I know people go, I don't want to bother somebody. It's 2 a.m. How inconvenient if you get a knock on the door at 3 a.m. from a law enforcement saying that you're either in jail or at the morgue. It's not too inconvenient to call someone to come get you. And there's so many other options out there.
So many cars.
Lyft, Uber.
All the ride-sharing services.
Exactly. And the average DUI, just no crash, no injuries, is going to cost you about $9,000 first time.
Unbelievable.
You taking in your lost work, you're taking in the fines, the fees, the attorneys, your increased insurance, $9,000 or a $40 Uber ride.
Yeah, if we made sensible decisions in everything we did in life, wouldn't things be much better? The numbers of drunk driving deaths and injuries nationally that I mentioned at the top of the show, those numbers are staggering. When we break those numbers down state by state, where does Arizona fit in? Are we doing better, worse in terms of where we rank? And what does the picture look like here compared to the rest of the nation?
Unfortunately, we usually, this is cylindrical. So we reached a point where our deaths and injuries went down. We were good for a year or two, and now for the last 2 years, we've gone up. So nationally, about 30% of all traffic fatalities are alcohol or other drug related. Here in Arizona, we're right around 32%. So comparatively, our statistics are going up. Not the way we want to be.
What do you have a thought about what makes this thing cyclical, or why it isn't trending in a straight line one way or the other?
When you start to think that you have the problem taken care of, people get lax. Drunk driving, that's not an issue anymore. There's so many ride shares. But if you're not using them, and you think, oh, well, I made it home this time, I can make it home next time, and then there's a crash, and then our statistics go back up.
So again, where does Arizona fit nationally? Do you have a sense of that?
So right now, we're 9th in the nation.
9th meaning the 9th worst numbers?
9th worst numbers as far as percentage-wise. Yes.
That's terrible.
Well, you have to figure a lot of our land is rural. So in order to get to any place, we drive a lot more than, say, people in New York. And so it's a little skewed at times, but our numbers are not the best.
Do you have a sense for where the safest places are? And there aren't that many places worse than Arizona on a per capita basis.
It's funny, but like New York, people that they have a lot of ride share and L's and everything already built in.
Mass transit.
Right. Here, if
there are people that don't even have cars in New York.
Exactly. So they're but it's a little, we're looking not apples to apples here.
MAD rates the various states in terms of their effectiveness in battling drunk driving. How does that rating system work, and where do we fit in?
So MAD rates on 5 different areas. One is all offender interlock. We know ignition interlocks work, and so does the state have it, and is there a compliance-based removal system? In other words, do you just get it up after your time, like if you're sentenced to 6 months or 12 months, or is it 6 months of compliance and then you can get it removed? The second one is sobriety checkpoints. Do you hold them, and then do you hold them monthly so that you enforce that? Really funny statistics. Sobriety checkpoints have to be advertised in Arizona. You can go to any law enforcement Facebook page. They'll tell you where they're going to be.
I always wondered about
how long they're going to be there, how many agencies, so you know how big a deal it is. But still, 2016, according to the Governor's Office of Highway Safety, more than 18,000 people in Arizona were caught impaired at sobriety checkpoints.
I didn't know that we had to inform people where the sobriety checkpoints are. I thought that was sort of interesting. It's a little bit like the vans with the photo cameras up here, where a couple of blocks before you
have to say careful.
They say up ahead there's a photo enforcement.
And then how many people do you know still got
they
photo?
They still zoom right through it because they don't pay attention.
The other one is automatic license revocation. So there's 2 parts to it. So one, if you get arrested, you get a 30-day automatic suspended license, and then you can either get a school release or a work release license where you can drive back and forth to where you need to be without roaming the streets. The other thing is no refusal. So if you automatically refuse to do a breath test, you get a suspended license. Part of it, and what they don't realize, is when you sign up to have a driver's license, you agree to take a breath test. So if you don't take it, is there automatic penalty for it? The other one is child endangerment. And this is so important because when it comes right down to it, maybe you've had some beers at home and your kids are like, it's hot, I want to go get an ice cream. Is it like, okay, come on, let's go? Kids say to their parents, get in the car, take me down. Or do the parents usually tell the kids, get in the car? And who has the choice? So we have to protect our kids. Again, if the responsible adult isn't going to do it, there has to be increased penalties.
So those are all the metrics that are used and when you put them all in the Waring blender, as I like to say, what comes out the other end? How do we look?
The average state rating nationwide is 2.92 out of 5. That's, not quite so good. But Arizona is one of only 5 states that received 4.5.
And I assume that's terrible.
No, 4.5 is amazing.
Oh, 4.5
out of 5.
Okay, you have to say which is the good end, which is the bad end.
Yes.
So 4.5 out of 5, that makes us proud.
Yes, we are one of the toughest states on impaired driving. We have here where you can get impaired to the slightest degree, 0.08 BAC or blood alcohol content, 0.15, 0.20. So if you get stopped, you could literally get 4 tickets for the same DUI, depending on what your level of impairment is. Not every state has impaired to the slightest degree.
So Beverly, I'm a slow learner. When we talked earlier about the where Arizona ranked, we ranked 9th, and that was we were the
and that's bad.
And that's bad. And yet the rating system that you just talked about, we rate good.
Is good. So all of the mechanism is in place. What we need to get is our community to buy into that and say, look, we are going to be out there. Either get in line, call for a ride, or the police will be happy to give you one.
We've got work to do, I can tell.
Yes.
All right, we're going to take a short break and then more of my conversation with Beverly Mason Biggers. You're listening to The Phoenix File. I'm Stu Turgel, and this is Radio Phoenix. Welcome back to the Phoenix File. I'm your host, Stu Turgel, and my guest in the studio tonight is Beverly Mason Biggers, and now more of our conversation about MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Beverly, before we took our break, we were talking about where Arizona stood in the ratings, and it certainly sounds that there's a lot of work ahead of us to get the numbers to go in a more positive direction. So let's talk about the goals of MAD. Over the years, you've had more than one multi-point plan aimed at working toward one number, 0. So tell us what the number 0 stands for, and what is MAD's approach to reaching that goal? What are you doing about what I believe is a real public health threat?
0 means no more victims. 0 means everybody is going to take responsibility. As a citizen, if I'm driving on the road, I have the right to expect you to stay on your side, just like you have the right for the other person coming at you to stay on their side. Again, this is a choice. And so it really comes down to personal responsibility and not getting behind the wheel after having anything. You can't judge your impairment. So it's not, I feel okay, you could still be impaired. But 0 just means, for example, 10,000 people were killed last year. That's 10,000 families that have to learn how to live without their loved ones. That should be 0, period.
So I'm impressed by the fact that you're not talking about a sort of moderate goal. 0 is a real stretch goal. That's a substantial, that's a real stretch.
But when you're talking about a deliberate act that kills innocent people, what number is a good moderate number?
So 0 really means zero tolerance.
0 means 0 tolerance. Again, there are so many options out there. You should not be behind the wheel after taking anything that impairs you. Again, alcohol, prescription drugs, illegal drugs, over the counter, anything that impairs you, don't get behind the wheel.
Don't do it. One of the most impressive tools in MAD's arsenal is the ignition interlock device. So tell us what it is, how it works, and how it finds its way into somebody's car or truck.
Ignition interlocks have changed over the years. They used to be big clunky things and you had to blow into them every 5 minutes or your car stopped and it created hazard. I mean, there was just so much about it. Now, there isn't hardly a person around who hasn't used, say, a treadmill at the gym, and you can hold on to the handles and it takes your heart rate. Your Fitbit does the same thing. That technology is now available for cars. They can either take the ambient air around and test it for alcohol, or it's non-intrusive. You touch a thumb pad and it can read whether there's alcohol in your system through your pores. And if you test at a prescribed limit, either 0.05, 0.08, your car won't start, period. You can find yourself with one of these lovely things in your car should you get convicted of a DUI. In Arizona, it's any convicted DUI offender has to have an ignition interlock in their car.
So it's mandated, it's required that it be in there. And of course, you have to pay for it, I'm sure.
Sure, you have to pay to put it in. And then there's a monthly charge because you have to take it in and they have to download all the information.
Right.
And then they make you pay to take it out. But I understand that it is a total hassle. It's a real buzzkill when you're on a date. It's like, excuse me, I have to hum into my ignition interlock. But I really challenge people, look at it as an educational tool. We know ignition interlocks work. After the first 2 years after it was mandated in Arizona, drunk driving deaths dropped 52%.
Are there people that voluntarily have them installed?
Sure. We have people all the time. Hey, my kid's getting it. I want to put it in. My son's going to college. Can we put it in? Or
that kind of sounds like they're doing it on behalf of a youngster or somebody else. Do people do it for themselves?
We do have. We also have people calling for, where can I buy a personal breath tester? And I tell them, please don't waste your money. Again, you may be able to test your alcohol and say, hey, I'm only a 0.05. I'm good to go. But we have slightest degree, so you can't judge impairment with a breath tester. Don't do it.
The data around the ignition interlock is very impressive. I read that since Arizona passed a law requiring ignition interlocks, there's been almost 600 of these devices installed. And I read that over the past decade, more than 79,000 drunk driving trips have been stopped because of the device. And while we don't often hear that Arizona has led the way in many things, our legislature did pass the interlock device law in 2007, and that makes us one of the best laws in the nation, resulting in a 45% reduction in drunk driving deaths. So are we progressive in something?
We are progressive in something. I mean, it did take us almost 8-9 years to pass 0.08 BAC, and that was only under threat of losing our federal funding. But we are progressive in some, and the ignition interlock is one of those. Again, if you look at it, the alcohol detection systems that they have should be mandatory in cars, just like seatbelts and airbags. Everybody thinks, oh my gosh, you're so intrusive. But it's not. It's a safety device. Pure and simple. Would you buy a car nowadays without a seatbelt or an airbag?
No, of course not. So is there anywhere in this country where that is the case? Probably not.
No, it's in the testing mode right now. It's going to be several years yet before they are offered. And of course, they're going to come out just like seatbelts did. They'll be exclusive because there'll be an extra charge for them, which is simply crazy to me. It's like wearing a helmet when you're riding a motorcycle. It's like wearing seatbelts when you're in your car. Hopefully, at some point in time, I'm looking for it to be mandatory standard safety equipment.
Wow, that's an interesting goal. While MAD started out with a singular focus on drunk driving, you've begun to widen your attention to include drugged driving as well. Do you think the time will come when you add another aspect of hazardous driving that is distracted driving?
We included drugged driving because alcohol is considered a drug. It is classed as a drug. So like any other drug, it is mind altering. It does damage if you misuse or overuse it. So it wasn't a stretch really to include drugged driving. I think maybe until we can get that number closer down to our zero goal, we probably are not, speaking for the national office, we're probably not going to be expanding. We have so much work to do in our area right now of impaired driving alcohol and drugs, I don't see.
Your plate's pretty full.
Yeah, I don't see it in the future unless.
But it's incredible. I don't know what the data is in terms of the number of automobile accidents and tragically deaths on the highway and on the roads as a result of distracted driving because of cell phone devices and other things, and people putting on their makeup or shaving or doing whatever. I mean, you see all sorts of things, but I think it's all part of it. It's about safe driving, but I can certainly understand where Mad's got all it can handle right now with drunk and drug driving. Is there still a need for volunteers?
Yes, of course there are.
What can people do to help your agenda?
We have, if you have 2 hours a week, if you have 2 hours a month, we have things going. We have a lot of educational programs that we want to get out into our schools. Educating our youth now on the dangers of underage drinking is so important. The human brain doesn't fully develop until 21 or 22. And now that we're living longer, my grandmother, God bless her soul, she's going to be 101 this August.
Good for her.
Kids don't think in the here and now. They just drink. They don't realize that they're damaging their brains now. And what are they going to use 50 or 60 years down the road?
So you could use volunteers to help in the whole educational process.
Helping victim services, going to court with victims.
So somebody who's listening tonight and wants to help, they want to volunteer, how do they reach you?
They can go to our website at www.mad.org/AZ and sign up, or they can call our office at 1-800-553-6233. And we would certainly welcome any helpful hands.
Well, that's terrific. I hope you'll get some volunteers as a result of that. And I want to say thank you to you, Beverly, and the entire MAD organization for really being untiring advocates when it comes to reducing the tragedy of drunk and drug driving. I've no doubt that countless Arizona families owe your organization a huge debt of gratitude for keeping their families whole. And thanks for being here with us tonight to talk about what you do.
Thank you, Stu.
That's our show for this week. Thanks again to my guest tonight, Beverly Mason Biggers of MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Please join me next week at this time for another conversation about the very best in our community who are improving the quality of life in the Valley of the Sun. Until next week, thanks for listening to The Phoenix File. For Radio Phoenix, this is Stu Turgel.